Okay, wait a moment. Wait a moment. One more moment, two more moments, three more moments, four more moments, and okay, great. So if you're watching this video on demand, which means after the live stream, well, that means you can skip a few minutes ahead because I always start by making sure that I don't waste 3 hours by not actually sending through video and audio. So skip a few minutes ahead. We'll get to Nodevember day 9. It's going to be soft, and we're going to talk about what that prompt means later. So if you are watching live, however, and there are two of you, you have a responsibility to tell me if you can hear and see me. Okay? If you are sitting there, you are 50% of the people, and I just have to sit here until that's the case, and then we'll get into November day 9 and what happened yesterday. So please confirm, and then we'll start. Yeah, that's how it starts. Damn right. Okay. Somebody. Anybody. No, I'm seeing if anybody. So the thing is, like sometimes I'll like live stream and realize, oh shit, it's muted, or oh shit, I'm like pointed at the wrong screen. Okay. I believe we are good to go. Okay, great. So today is Nodevember day 9. So far, haven't missed a single day, and I realize it's November 8th, but I stay a day ahead. Before we get into what day 9 is, let's go over what we did yesterday. So the prompt for yesterday, this is spelled wrong, but it's bejeweled, okay? And what I went for, and you didn't see this yet because I did this like after the fact, I made a nice little breakdown, so check this out. So that's the render we did, looking beautiful. And this was the whole process as like a very generalized thing. Kind of like one of those viral YouTube shorts that I've had to work in the past sometimes. But I think this turned out great, and what it ended up being was procedural modeling, turning it into an SDF, and then spawning, and a lot of good compositing. Okay, so that's what happened yesterday, and before we get into the new thing, I do want to mention, I feel like an obligation to, go to cgmatter.com. That will take you here. And I'm going to use a bunch of nodes that you can get for free, regardless of if you're a website member or not. So I know some of you follow along live, in which case I would recommend doing this. Updated it recently. And for all the Nodevember, you can go into the member site if you are, and that's $5. And in here, you can see all of the Nodevember things, including day 8. You click it, and it downloads the file. So all the project files, I'm going to populate whatever it is we make today there, and, you know, all your normal tutorial project files, 5 years of archive. Okay, the shill is done. What is November day 9, and what is the plan? So day 9 is soft. It's soft. And the obvious thing, at least that I was thinking of, is okay, we're going to make some kind of fabric. We're going to make yarn, or we're going to make wool. You could make a pillow. And while I do kind of deviate in that direction, I always want to pick something that's kind of a challenge and kind of unique. So what is soft? Well, today I was at the gym doing something called the executive workout, and I saw something that reminded me of, let's find a good image, of sheep's wool. So it is kind of still this fabric thing, but it's much more elaborate. And the thing that makes it sheep wool is kind of these spirals and kind of these loose hairs. So it's not that we're making a material, we're still making like a distribution. This kind of looks like an AI image, actually. But I want to spawn it on any surface, so anything can become sheep's wool. So that's the idea. And yeah, if you came here because of the thumbnail, it's like that, but a little less like wrong, or like, I feel like the thing to say is cursed, but I think a better word might be Just wrong. Okay, so let's make some sheep's wool. I'm going to be using Blender 5.0. As of today, Blender 5.0, not the beta, comes out on November 11th, so in 3 days. Very excited about that, so I can stop saying, oh, we're doing 5.0. That's just going to be the default. So let's get started. I'm going to make a day 9 folder. In that folder, I'm going to make Nodevember day 9 soft. And in 3, 2, 1, let us begin. Okay, so what is sheep's wool other than a bunch of spirals that follow a complicated logic instanced together in a way where you could avoid self-intersection, but because there are these fine fibers, you wouldn't even be able to tell. So the name of the game is making that complicated spiral, and then we're kind of done from that point onwards. So probably the obvious thing to do is to start with a spiral node, curve spiral, and it should get smaller as it goes to the tip. And I'm going to bring in my image reference, specifically this spiral one. And all these images tend to look a bit different. I don't know if it's because of different sheep types or like some of these are AI generated, but when I think about sheep's wool, it looks like this. Kind of like almost kind of disgusting if you were to get it wet. So to emulate that, I want to make sure that the end radius is 0 so that it kind of pinches at the top. It's going to be substantially shorter, and it seems to rotate almost like only a half rotation or like 75% of a rotation. So let's go to 0.75 rotations. So you see it doesn't like necessarily do a full spiral, and it's along this that I have to do the complicated logic. So if we isolate a spiral here, what's a good case? They're almost like curly fries. If I isolate, just trying to find one that depicts what I'm about to say. Like this one. It's like it follows a general shape. Like every pack of hair belongs to a clump, but that packing follows the logic of you start here, and then you have a bunch of like neighbors that follow kind of this average direction, but they kind of frizz out, and that represents a single clump. So there's a lot of ways to do this. I think the most obvious is we're going to end up using the distort node, which I don't have because I don't think I have the add-on enabled. Okay, yeah, so this is what I was talking about with cgmatter.com. You get this node, or this add-on, that lets you download nodes. So I'm going to dump them here and click Update. And that will make you a file path and everything that you need. Okay, so now I should have my distort node, which is going to let me, distort it. But I want to distort it along the path and much weaker. So what I mean by this is it should start heavily distorted, but kind of end at a single tip or something close to it. So to approximate that, I'm going to use this spline parameter that goes along this. And then let's see. You can see here that the bottom is kind of pinned. We, of course, want the opposite, and probably the easiest way to do that is there is a reverse. Or to keep the general shape, I can reverse curve here. That way the tip stays stable. So I'm going to bring down the scale. I'm going to bring up the detail and the roughness. And then finally, I want to scale the overall strength by some multiplier that I can control later. So something like that. Okay, so now we have a very basic setup that will let me create a deviation from a spiral. And really the name of the game now is instancing or doing a loop on these where every iteration for each is going to be slightly different. Emphasis on for each, because this is actually a case where I'm probably going to use the for each zone, which I rarely use, so very exciting. Since I want each one randomized, I'm going to use the coordinates of this noise texture that's inside of here. And for this position, that is the coordinate system, I can add a bit of an offset, which will act, right? It will act like a seed. You conceived. What? Okay. And this in itself should probably be it could be even an integer. That's fine. So that each integer represents a seed. So here's 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Great. So we have our curve. We reverse it. And then this is going to be our distortion. I think that's fine. So all of this is going to be a node group. And then the question is, what do I want to control? So this can be our spiral. This vector represents our seed, which can actually be reduced to an integer because it will shift the x, y, and z. It's fine. It doesn't really matter what it is. So this is the seed. It's going to output a spiral. And let's consolidate, which is my favorite word in these live streams. We're going to consolidate, 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 and we are now ready to proceed. What else do I want to make a parameter? Because I can basically randomize these per iteration. So I definitely want the strength to probably be a thing. And do I want the roughness and all of that? No, I think that's fine. So all of this spiral node group reduces to, if I increase the header, it reduces to this. Now I want to not exactly instance, but I want to iterate where I can take this and make it different each time. So unlike what you might think, where I like take points and I say, let's do 10 of these, and I instance on points like this, I don't want to just randomize the scale, rotation, and location. I want to actually do these individually, which instance on points does not allow you to do. So instead, we're going to do for each of these points. So since we have only points, we iterate on points, not edges, faces, or whatever. For each of these, we include a spiral. So the way you want to interpret this is it's going to do 10 iterations, and it's going to output this every single time, and it's going to join it together. So that's important to understand. If I look at this spiral over here, you can see it's a single spline, whereas this one is 10 splines. They're just perfectly overlapping. But for each iteration, we get a index, so it's starting at 0, I believe. So 0, 1, 2, 3, up until n minus 1. So in this case, it's 9. That can be the seed. And now you can see we have that. And if I was to go into this, I can control the overall kind of situation here. So maybe I do want to expose some of these noise parameters. So maybe like the noise detail and the noise roughness and probably the noise scale. So to get that nice and neat, we're going to use panels, which I think they've been here since like 4.4 or something. But this is going to be our noise, which is going to get a scale. It's going to get a detail. Let's make that bigger. Okay, so it's going to get a scale, it's going to get a detail, and it's going to get a roughness. Great. So now when I expose this out here, I can control the overall behavior. And this could be a single clump, right? And maybe I could also make the amount of rotation a thing so that each clump doesn't necessarily spin the same amount. So let me also add its level of rotation that applies on each of these, but we could put this for each inside of for each, if that makes any sense. Okay, there we go. So now let's just shape it to look the way I want it to. So maybe like a higher strength, a bigger scale, and maybe 30 iterations. So that's a nice spiral. I do want it to not literally converge on a point, but pretty close to it. So right now, spline parameter goes from 0 to 1. It gets multiplied. I don't want it to go from 0 to 1, so let's map 0 to 1 to like 0.1 to 1, or even 0.25. So that way it doesn't terminate at a single endpoint. Additionally, since these are all curves, I could trim them, right? But by a random number. I think so. So for each iteration, I'm going to use a random value, but a single random value, cgmatter.com for that. So this is going to output the same number for everything that shares the seed instead of being like per point in a sense. So this index is going to be the seed. If I go 0 to 1, some of them might be pretty short. So by default, this is 0. So I'm just going to go from 0 to like 0.25. So that way some of the hairs don't make it all the way to the end. Anything else I want to do? I think that's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. Any insights? Are we doing hair fur for soft? Yes. I'm doing sheep's wool. Okay, so that is a single spiral.
How many people are on?
61.
Wow.
That's like
That's
3 classrooms.
much bigger than this house.
Like in terms of how many people are here?
Yeah.
That's true. uh, do you have any recommendations?
For what?
For the
For the sheep?
yeah, for the fur.
It should be fluffy.
Thanks. Okay, so we have a spiral, and I was just given good advice to make it soft. So I'll take that into consideration. Okay, so here we have a single spiral, and my goal is to instance this on any object. So I'm going to use a sphere to demo this. So let's go 100 by 60. And on this, I'm going to distribute points on faces. So each one of these is going to represent a spiral that might have its own thing. So I might run it through its own for each zone. Okay. And then if I instance, which I may change again, but if I instance on points, we're going to get a bunch of big spirals. So I want to make sure their scale is smaller. So now you can see they're on the surface. I want to make sure they're mapped to the normal of the sphere or whatever it's going to be. So rotation goes to rotation. And already that's looking pretty good, actually. And I'm going to add a random contribution, which I made a node for. So anything that I'm like, oh, I'm doing this over and over and over again, I end up turning into a node. So random rotation just outputs a negative pi to pi rotation scaled by some number, which you can think of as the variance. So I'm going to add a random rotation here with a strength of like 0.25. So before and after. Although maybe this one should be mainly on the z-axis, right? I think so. So I'm going to take this random rotation, I'm going to unpack it like that. So now we can actually edit what's going on in here. And this random value, which goes from minus pi to pi, like I said, if I make it 0 to 0, now it should just rotate like this? Or is that the wrong axis? I think it's the wrong axis. Let's think. So I'm going to go minus pi to pi. And then maybe instead of a scale, I replace the strength. So maybe I'll edit the node group, but I'm going to replace the strength with a vector so that I can control x, y, z individually. And then instead of a scale, it's going to be a multiply. So by default, the strength should be 1, 1, 1. Okay. So when this is set to 1, 1, 1, we get that. And now we can experiment with which one matters. So it's not that. It is that one. So it's the y-axis I care about. So I'm going to add full strength on the y-axis and then just a little, maybe 10% on the other axes. Okay, that's pretty good. And then we take that, we bring up the density, and once we turn this into a mesh, I believe it will look pretty good. So how do I intend to do that? Well, remember, this is our single spiral. And I want to make sure that this like group of splines, essentially, turns into a mesh in a way that looks quite nice. And I might add some like outliers here. But so I'm going to take curve, I'm going to turn it into a mesh, where the profile is going to be a curve circle with maybe, it should be a small number since we're going to have a lot of these. So maybe like 5 iterations at a smaller scale. Just like that. And then the scale, it should start off, I was going to say it should start off thick but then thin out, but I think a hair, if I was to take one of my hairs, is a constant radius. Okay, as you can see. Huh?
Sorry, I forgot.
Thanks. Okay. There's distractions, but it's important to realize what's important. Okay, so I'm going to take the radius, bring it down so it's nice and thin, and then I want to see what that looks like if I instance it. That's already looking quite soft. Can I, if you're going to speak, Dor, can I get an opinion?
Okay.
Is it looking soft already?
It definitely looks like fur.
Okay.
I feel like to look soft.
Like it's gonna be a lot more of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Okay, so I want this, but instead of instancing, I want to do a sort of instancing where I can vary this per iteration, which we already know how to do. So the only difference is instead of instance on points, what I can do is I can do a for each zone, and maybe we should compress this into a node group so it's easy to interpret. So all of this is going to take a number of points and turn it into a spiral mesh. And then what do I want to control? I want to control the number of strands that make up a spiral. I want to control the noise. What does strength mean? Strength means it means the overall distortion. What is this? I multiplied here. So that's the distortion strength. So actually I need that in here. I think I want a height slider, maybe? No, that's fine. And they can be less iterations. Okay. So now the idea is, what was I doing? The idea is we have a node group that represents a clump. And this has a for each zone, so we're going to nest these. So what else do I want to control? I want to control the rotations for sure. And then maybe the strength matters. And I think the scale should be pretty uniform. And I think the rest is pretty good to go. Okay, so this, again, represents a single clump. And then we have our points. And then for each of these, so that's the key insight, for each of these points, I'm going to create one of these clumps. That's going to output, and then it's going to join, which we expect to be quite slow. So now they're all going to be perfectly overlapping. But you can see there's 4 million of them. Very cool. We could turn them into instances, but okay. So you're going to see they're all perfectly overlapping, which is weird because our points start at different positions and they have different normals. What you have to understand is this clump is just going to be repeated. If we don't say the position, it's not going to have one. If we don't say what orientation it's going to be, it's not going to have one. So what you can do is you can actually plug in parameters here. So I can plug in, for example, a position, which is going to be a field, different for every point, but when it goes into a for each zone, now you can see it's a single value. That's what this represents. And that makes sense because we're doing it for each point. So every single point is going to have its own position. It's no longer a field. Same with the rotation here. Control click, I can name that rotation. So the clump, once we make it, I want to move it. Or do I want to rotate it first? Maybe I do both. I move it and I rotate it, and then I view what this makes. And I think that's correct. Actually, the only thing might be the scale. So if I make this 0.1, I think we're back to where we started. What happens if I turn off this variability? Yes, that is correct. Yes. But do they all have the same rotation? I think it might be an order of operations kind of thing. Let's see. So I'm going to rotate it, and then I'm going to transform it once it's in the correct orientation. Okay? Is that any different? So let's see. Let's make a version that's just transformed and see if this outputs the exact same thing. So transformed, position, rotation, output this at a scale of 0.1. And are these identical? They are. Okay. So I think I'm just missing something when it comes to the rotation. But what is that? So we have a random rotation that depends on the seed, which by default, the seed is going to be the index. So that should be the same. I wonder if I pass this in here and then do the addition after the fact, if there's any difference. Why is that doing that? So we have this rotation, and then I add a contribution, but that flattens them out for some reason. Why is that the case? This is a seed that creates a random vector that is multiplied by the strength. So if I set this to 0, 0, 0, it should do nothing, actually. Why the fuck is that the case? What if I do this? I think it's like treating the seed weirdly or something like that. I don't know what the difference would be, actually. If anybody knows, leave a comment. It might be very useful for what we're doing. Okay. So let's see what happens. I increase that, no. I increase that, no. No. So all of a sudden, they kind of lose the orientation I want. Weird. Why is that the case? So I take the rotation, I add a random contribution, I do enjoy my thumbnails. Why is that doing that? Because what I'm thinking is it should be aligned to its axis. Why? So the rotation goes into here. Let me try a different method and see if it's any different. So I am going to store on each of these points that are going to be passed in here a rotation. I'm going to make that a rotation thing, which isn't an option, so we'll just call it a vector. I'm going to pass this inside of here, And then instead of using this rotation, I'm going to use the attribute for rotation and see if that works. But now it thinks it's a field. Huh. Does anybody know what's going on here? So let's see. I passed this through here. This so far I understand. What if instead of addition I do a rotate rotation? I mean, I think it should give the same thing, but let's see. I'm going to take my rotation. What if I do X? Okay, that does that. Y does that. Z does that. What if I do local? I'm just trying to get it to spin on the surface that it's on. I think that's what it was actually, right there. I'm going to take the clumps and bring down the density of them just for visualization. Is that doing what I want it to do? I think it is. So I think the issue is we were operating in global space instead of local space. So now if I do this, and I set the strength to 1, and then 0.1, I think now we are good. Yes. Okay, cool. So we have this, great. This is kind of the key slowdown here. So if I go, even with 5 lines, we're already at 500,000. So at 30, we're at 4 million. So I think what we want to bring down is, since I still want all of these lines, and I don't necessarily want to mess with instances yet, I can go into the spiral, into the resolution. What if I make it 10? That's a massive savings. So maybe 20? Because we're going to have so many you might not be able to tell. It's looking like the surface of a turbulent star. So for anybody that's trying to answer the question, the answer is we were doing rotation in global space instead of local space. In other words, a rotation on the z will always be in reference to the z-axis, whereas if I have a point over here and I want the z to basically be the normal, local space will account for that. It won't use this always. So that's what, solved it. As for the scale, this can be randomized as well by using a single random value. So 0.1 seems pretty good. So let's go from 0.05 to 0.12. So it roughly hovers around this. This is all going to give the same number because it's always using the same seed. But if I use the index, now they will be variable. Great. Great, great, great. And since we did all this work to do a for each zone, we may as well take advantage of that, right? So not all of these need to have the same count or whatever, especially the rotations. I want some of them to be more rotated than others. So I'm going to use my single random value to generate a number. So it seems like 1 is pretty good. So let's go from 0.7 to 1.7 maybe. So now these are not all going to have the same rotation. And then additionally, they don't all need to have the same number of hairs. So maybe it can go as low as 5 and as high as 35. Okay? So it's much more expensive than instancing, but at a much, higher quality gain. I think the last thing I want to do before I can begin consolidating is this clump. If I look at it over here, I like the way it looks, but it's not necessarily sitting on the XY axis like I want it to. So I could either bring it up, or now I'm also having a thought. What if I take this clump, I'm going to hide the curve to mesh, So let's actually see what kind of savings that gets us. So right now, if I was to view this, we're at a third of a second, 300 milliseconds per, calculation. If I hide this, so I never do that step, is that any different? It is. It is. Okay, what can we do? We can bring down the resolution of each strand. You're totally not going to see that. So that went from 1 million, 1.1 to about half of that. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. And then what was the strength? The strength was the deviation. That should also be randomized. So we're just going to use this single random value everywhere. So I'm going to do the index here. 0.5 is quite noisy. So let's go from 0.3 to 0.7, so it averages around there. Great. And now to see this, more fully, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the density and crank it and hope the computer doesn't explode. Okay. So to actually visualize this and see, is it soft? Is it capturing the idea? I want to take the UV sphere, which for now I'm just going to copy over. We'll make it a custom thing soon. And I want to join the original surface with the thing that we're pseudo-instancing on it. So now it's not going to look as hollow. And to actually visualize this, I think we're going to need cycles. Otherwise, you really can't tell. No. Okay. So let's set up some basic lighting or, something. So I'm going to go to cycles. And so far, we're only half an hour in. That's quite a lot of progress, actually. We're going to go to GPU compute. This is going to let me render this. Okay, this is already looking quite soft. I'm happy with it. And to do the lighting, before I actually add lights, I want to see if a sky texture can capture it, because it looks good and involves only nodes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay. And then let's hide the background. That's not necessary. Bring down the strength. Ooh. Can I ask for input? Is it starting to look soft?
So I feel like part of what makes it look fluffy is that there's a copious amount of the.
So do you think if I sparse?
Sparse and wound.
Oh, you think it's like the spiral converges?
There needs to be more air.
Got it. Okay,
It's woolly, but it's not soft.
it is supposed to be sheep's fur though.
I understand.
Okay, but you're saying, so right now if it ends at a tip, you're saying it should kind of squeeze but not as much. So wait, are you saying, so wait, well, no, okay, so let me show you the reference. So this is vaguely what I'm trying to refer to.
And your threads are too wound tightly.
Okay, so you're saying instead of this, it should just be this. Is that what you're saying?
Just a large, it should be this.
Do it again.
Instead of this, it should be this. More air.
I see. So kind of so wait, you're saying the difference between this?
Yes, and then the thread should not be so packed. The packing needs to be looser.
I see. Okay, so the recommendation given was to change the spiral winding and to change how they're distributed.
Look how soft this looks. It's because it's you can see the air.
I see. Okay, so you're saying, so wait, is it almost like you're saying, wait. So you see those clumps? Is it almost like you're saying you should be able to see the individual tips?
Yes.
Got it.
It should not be wound so tightly.
Got it.
That looks like.
So tell me what you think about this. So I'm getting advice to have tips. So can I ask for an opinion? Okay. So I'm going to change a single number. Okay. And you just tell me if it's closer. Ready? You ready? She's not ready.
I'm not ready.
I guess she didn't choose to watch.
Okay, yeah, what?
Okay, so this is what it is. I literally didn't change anything.
Okay.
Okay, so this is before. No, I see what you mean. Wait. Let me try again. No? Well, now you can see the individual things. So wait, you're saying... Okay, wait.
Longer, more.
Wait. I think I know what you're saying. I think you might be saying less rotation.
But now you need more of them.
Right. But if I do that...
You also need like 3 layers. It's true.
Okay. Literally somebody commented it should be layers of wool.
They're right.
When she knows, she knows. Okay, so let's try that. Let me try to do some offset so that there's like a fundamental layer and then few but some poking above that. So almost like your hair didn't grow in uniformly. Or we could do clumping as a noise. I actually kind of like that idea. Herm. Okay, I want to try that. So I want to make sure that I optimize this because this is about to get expensive. So inside the clump, and the thing is we can't bake any part of this because it's all like interdependent. But inside of here, I'm going to bring down the number of this. So now it goes from 3 million to like 2 million, but that's kind of rough, isn't it? Okay, let's do that. That's already optimized. Yeah, most of these are already optimized. Okay. Well, let's just see what we get. I'm going to crank this from 200 to 500. See what that gives us. And we can use Poisson distribution so that we get the ooh. I understand it kind of looks like spaghetti. It looks like really soft spaghetti. Ooh. I'm not sure if this calls for individual hair strands as much as for a displacement map because you can't even tell the individual hairs in the reference, more like the overall shape. I see. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something like this. I'll fix it up, but then I do a second layer of clumping. And if you saw the video, I think like literally the last tutorial. So let me show you something. If you saw, actually I can load up the website, cgmatter.com. There was one where we did a similar idea to what I'm trying to say here. Okay, it was the feather. So if you look inside the feather here, I know it's low res, but you see we kind of do this distribution of the feather to begin with, and you have to wait for it because it will clump, so wait for it. So it's a pretty long, it's a pretty long GIF. Although I'm AVIF now. Like this is like 100 kilobytes, it's crazy. Okay, wait, so we have the feather, we distribute, and then we clump. I think that's what is missing, actually. And that's nice because it's only like a second layer that we can bake in between. So actually, let's assume this is frozen for now. So instead of copying the UV sphere, I'm just going to use the same thing here. What did I do wrong? There we go. So I'm going to temporarily, I'm just going to temporarily bake this. And I'm going to make sure to do it to disk. Otherwise, it's going to take forever to save each time because this is going to be like a gigabyte or something like that. So bake to disk. And it's doing that. Okay, so yeah, that's like almost half a gigabyte, just this. But now when we look at it, let me make sure. Thought I was accidentally playing the timeline. No. So now when we look at this, it's still going to be like 6 million whatever, but it's going to be much faster to load. Okay. So what I'm saying is I'm going to take the original surface right here. I'm going to distribute points on faces, and this is exactly where I want to do Poisson distribution to almost isolate, and I think I had a better image actually for what I'm planning. This one. So you can see how there are these clumps and they're almost facing a certain direction. I want each clump to be represented by a point. So let's do some spacing and bring them up. So you can see none of them are intersecting, whereas with random, some of them are quite clumped together. What I want to do is I want to look for the nearest point, and it vaguely gravitates towards that. Almost like it got wet one time, it clumped, it dried, and it never fixed, right? So to do that, I need to find the nearest point and go to it, which obviously is geometry proximity, but I'm trying to see if I can do better. No, that's pretty efficient too. So I would do geometry proximity. I would look for the nearest point, and then what I would do is I would set position, so I'm moving the hairs towards this position based on this distance. Okay? So instead of going 0 to 1, so in other words, let's say I have a clump over here, or like a spiral, and this is our point. I want this to gravitate this way, but not the whole thing. I want only the areas that are close to go, whereas this one barely moves, almost like gravity in a way. So instead of going 0 to 1, I go 1 to 0, and then all I do is for the position, I'm going to mix the original position with the position of the nearest point. So when it's 1, it's going to try to get quite close. So this is going to look a little whack to begin with, but let's see. As promised. Okay, so the reason this is happening is it's like converging fast. So first of all, let me reduce the... This might be better to actually visualize. So here, you can barely see, is actually this map of saying the distance to the nearest point for all of these. So I'm going to bring down the search range. Okay, so now you can see these represent our clumps, right? I'm going to make more of them. I'm going to make this even tinier, so it's got to be quite close to be influenced by this. Maybe a bit bigger. And then as it's more white, it will try to get there. So I think this will be a bit better. So let's see. Before, after. It's kind of hard to tell. Okay. Let's do this in rendered mode. And note that this is hollow at the moment, which is why you can see light passing through. So before, after, you totally can't tell. What if I make that bigger? No. I haven't touched GeoNodes ever. Where do I start? By watching these live streams. No, I made a course on 80 level if you're interested in learning from me. Introduction to geometry nodes, but otherwise just look on YouTube. So I'm going to look at this. And this should work. However, I know the issue. The issue is it's looking for the nearest point, but it's actually under the spiral. It's on the sphere. So to move there, it has to go inwards. And it's not actually looking, it's not getting an accurate distance. It's not getting an accurate distance because it needs to be in reference to the surface. So let me show you what I mean. So I want you to imagine so I want you to imagine, and you don't have to imagine, I'll show it right here. We have this, okay? It could have been spawned on any surface. In this case, it was off of the UV sphere. But if you look at it like from the side, and I look right over here, you can see it's actually growing off of the side quite substantially. When I look at the nearest point, right, we should be on the surface when we're doing that calculation. Okay? So what I mean by that is I can take the nearest surface, which in this case would be the sphere, and I want to set position such that all these hairs go to, well, we can sample anything we want. I'm going to sample the position, so it's going to look for the nearest surface. Where is that? And then it's going to move there. Okay, so this is the same thing. It's the same thing, but it's actually looking for the nearest surface. The reason it looks so facetted is because the UV sphere is quite facetted. Okay? And it's this position that I want to use to sample the, geometry proximity. And it turns out you can actually do that without doing a set position, because in this geometry proximity, it's going to look for the nearest point and tell me the distance, but by default, it's using the sample position of position as if it was already there, but I can use a custom position. So that's what I'm going to go for. Let's see. So this is default, and this is with sample position. Okay. So let's see the difference in the map itself. Okay. So if I look at this, now we have this map over here, whereas if I didn't do this position, you can see it looks different. Okay. And what this means is the distance can be much closer to 0 because it can overlap it. It's not off the surface, right? And if I look at this map range instead, okay, so now look at these highlights of how strong the effect should be, basically. So before, after. It's now reaching the hairs here. So before, after. Great. So now we have the clumping logic, and those should go to the nearest point. Great. And then the question is, how visible is this difference? It's definitely visible, and sometimes even glitchy. But it's definitely trying to do something. And by the way, this glitchiness comes from two nearby points looking at different nearest points. So if two neighbors are quite close to each other yet have different nearest neighbors, they're going to stretch. So first of all, I'm going to take the number of points and make that much bigger. They can even be closer. Let's see what that looks like now. Okay, so you can see they're converging to more points. But the fall off is too sharp. And they shouldn't be able to go all the way. Like, the idea is there, but it's not quite working. Like, another thing we could do is maybe we could do like a smooth Voronoi texture to kind of achieve things. I'm just trying to like basically compress in certain areas, but in a smooth way. Could I literally blur the nearest position? Does that make any sense? Oh, thank you, Ben S. Thank you, Ben S. Very nice of you. Okay. It's money. It's money.
Ben S gave you money?
Ben S gave me money.
That's so nice.
Not Ben M. That's a different Ben.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can actually smooth the position. That stabilized it quite a lot. Before, after. You gotta admit when it looks shitty. Let's see if there's any recommendations. I have actually done procedural mold. Watch Rabbit Trap. Now that it's done, I can talk about it, actually. So there's this movie, didn't do quite well in theaters, called Rabbit Trap that I worked on, and there's a big mold sequence. Minor spoilers. This guy, or 50% this guy, wasn't all me. Another thing that would make it easier to see, by the way, is I'm going to join it with the original surface. And that procedural mold, by the way, used Conway's Game of Life, if you can believe it. I thought it was super clever. Okay, so wait, this bunching isn't working. Okay, I have another idea. I have another idea that's also faster to compute. Okay, check this out. So what the bunching does is it compresses it to certain areas, but it's more than that. It should be going to certain areas and upwards. And upwards. So what that means is essentially we're going to be offsetting off the normal of the nearest surface. So for example, like a clump over here, we'll look at where is it on the sphere. It will look for the normal and it will go outwards. Okay? So what this means is if I sample the nearest surface of the sphere, but instead of the position, I look at the normal, that will tell me which way I need to offset. So let's say I offset like this. This should just expand outwards. Like that. Yeah. But it needs to do that based on some map. And let's try a Voronoi texture for this. Okay, so Voronoi texture is going to look like that. So you can almost see the clumps here. I'm going to make them have more clumps. I think this is probably a better way to go anyways. And I'm going to invert this, which I made a node for. Invert float. And that is going to determine the scale of this moving off the surface idea. Okay, it's whack, yes, but it is in clumps. Okay, I take this math, I multiply it, that was a mistake, I multiply it by like 0.1. I think that did it, actually. Let's make it a bit more extreme. Yes. And maybe instead of all this, I get control over the proximity using a map range. So instead of going 0 to 1, it goes 1 to 0. It goes less high, and the area of effect needs to be smaller. Way smaller. And way less tall. Okay, so it's very rough, but I think you can see the idea here. So I do a smoother step. I increase the radius. And maybe I make it so that there's less of them. Okay, I mean, obviously this isn't like the final result, but you can see it is now clumping. Great. So how do I make this more, right? What happens if I make it smooth F1 instead? Okay, well, it's smoother. I take the scale. I bring it up. Okay, okay. Great. But one thing that's making it weird is every single clump is going to the same height. But note that this Voronoi map that we're using for like the offset in a way also comes with a color, which can be used as a random number, basically. So instead of going up to 0.1, I can separate this to just look at the x component, which can go from 0 to 1. I multiply this by the desired height, and this will let it go from 0 to 0.1 per clump. Yeah, and now all the clumps aren't necessarily the same. Great. And even better, if I can map range this instead of going from 0 to 1, whatever, it goes up to 0.1. But it can't go as low as 0. It can go to a third of the height. Okay. Okay, I'm starting to like that quite a lot. Yeah. Okay, so now, and maybe it still doesn't go as tall. So like 0.06 to, let's say, 2. Okay. And one idea, by the way, is I'm pretty sure all this logic isn't necessarily dependent on there being a mesh. Okay, so what I mean by this is if I go to clump, so this is before the bake, is the idea. I go into the clump and I turn off curve to mesh. It will give the same thing, but now this is a big curve. And I'll show you why I'm doing this in a moment. I'm then going to rebake this so that I don't have to do the calculation again and again. So now this is going to output the curve. We're doing the set position idea, which is going to make the same spikes, but now, because it's still a curve, I can fillet it or resample it. So this might break. Let's see. That worked. So that can be treated as a kind of smoothing. Or, and I'm nervous to do this one, I could fillet the curve, and then the idea is at the end I turn it into a mesh. So fillet curve by poly, limit radius 2. Okay, before, after. This is definitely the way to go. And then at the very end here, I run curve to mesh that uses a curved circle, a tiny one with a low resolution. Was that a mistake? Okay, that was fine. And I'm going to bake what we have so far. I'm definitely going to change it, but for now, this will let me compute this faster. So it only takes, allegedly, 1/10 of a second. I take the radius. I bring it down. Okay. I bring it down. Okay. I bring it down. And let's see what that looks like. Even lower. Okay. So we have that, and now we just have to get our clumping right. So from 0 to 0.3, it should go to its clump, or it should go outwards relative to the normal by a random number, but we then smooth it, so I think we can afford to go a little higher with this. And let's see what that gets us. So now the issue is we're dealing with really high numbers here. And I'm also going to use the fillet curve. So this is before and after. And then I can increase the number of clumps. But then you kind of start losing the plot a little. Okay. Cool. Rebake. Okay, this one has clumps. Yeah. Yeah. I think that one did it. So just to compare, let's do the one without clumps as well. So I'm going to bake a version like this. I'm going to run the same curve to mesh, or maybe we could just run a switch through this. No. We run a switch through this. Okay. So this is the clumped version, and this is the not clumped version. You'll see in a moment. Or do I have them inverted? Ah, this is incorrect. It should be this one. Let's wait for it. Wait, did it do it? So this version has all the stuff. Bake. It's not doing the math. Oh, because it's already baked there, so I actually don't need that. That goes in here. Okay, there we go. So this is with clumping. I can make this a bit bigger. This is with clumping, and this is going to be without in a second once it loads. And, oh, did I not click it? Okay, so this is with clumping, and this, once it loads, is without. With clumping, without. With clumping. There we go. That definitely adds. Okay, time to consolidate. Because we have gone off the rails here. Like, I've forgotten what we're even doing. So we start by distributing a bunch of points on a surface. And that surface should probably be defined by whatever we have here. Okay? So it's actually going to use the geometry of the object. So I'm going to run a group input. And I'm going to do that for anything that uses this. So this is going to get a group input. And then this is going to get a group input. So now we got to be careful to not make the object too big because it's going to be dependent on surface area, the number of points that it makes. So we start with our mesh. We distribute points on that mesh. And then we run this like for each operation that will spawn a bunch of spirals once it's ready on that. Kind of hard to see because it's so dense, but there are spirals. So let's get all of that working. And by the way, in this process, it's going to generate many random numbers and make sure that each iteration is its own. So that's why it's running a bit slower than instance on points, because I want the customizability. Okay, so all of these are going to be with the clumping. And then this gets transformed and joined. Okay. And then this position's here. Rotate rotation of a random rotation. Great. Okay. So this part, so here we have our clump, which really should be like our hair spiral, although inside of here we have a spiral. So maybe we do call it hair clump. Or like, it's weird because after this we're going to have clumping, so I need a better name. So here, let's see. So this is what this outputs, one of these. So I can call this like a hair cluster. Okay. So we have our hair cluster that gets transformed in all this. Okay. So all of this, my point, can be a node group. And we can call this like distribute. It's not instance, it's distribute clusters. Or distribute spiral clusters. And that should have some parameters, namely the number of clusters maybe the seed, and then the rest is kind of accounted for. Yeah. Okay, so distribute hair clusters. That gets baked because it's expensive. And then our next step is to offset the normals. Okay? So this is what's going to, in essence, create those clusters, right? Or those clumps. Okay, we need different names. Okay, so we're going to look at our geometry and we're going to sample the nearest normal. In other words, we're going to ask what direction goes outside of the thing that spawns. And by the way, I was a bit embarrassed. My wife was in here and she's very supportive in all this, but what can I say? It's harder to work when there's somebody viewing. That's what I'm saying. But she gave some great input. That's why we did clumping anyways. Okay. So, what do I want to control? What I said, and thank you, are you an albino in the thumbnail? I'm a sheep in the thumbnail, obviously. Okay, so let's consolidate. I set position, and then I fillet. This fillet is just for like some smoothing. This we never ended up using, so it's actually much simpler than it looks. So we sampled the nearest normal, and we offsetted, but we didn't just use the nearest normal. We wanted to multiply by some contributions. So some areas do get offsetted, some don't. So I took the distance of the Voronoi from 0 to 0.5 of this. Actually, most of this should remain exposed, honestly. Yeah. Because these are all things that like heavily change the look of this. Okay. Okay, so all of this now can be called our hair clumping. Got to remember that. So hair clumping. What goes into here is the surface, which is on the bottom. I don't want that to be the case. So surface goes on the bottom. Or sorry, it should go on top. And then here goes our hair. And I can just like name these so I remember. This is our surface. This is our surface. Surface. What comes out? Hair comes out. Hair density. Okay. And then finally, we run a round of smoothing, which I guess could go in here, right? So what parameters do we want here, actually? Because this one's quite important. Probably the Voronoi scale for sure. I want the... I think that's it for Voronoi, actually. I'm not going to play with the rest of these, so I'm fine with that. I also want... going from 0 to 1 to this. Yeah. Yeah, that's the height, which I could throw through a multiplier, actually, to control that easily. So it's going to stay random and start with like a good default value. But if you want, you can scale it up. So this multiply is clump height. And then this can be like the radius of effect. So some of them go off the normal with some height, but which ones are the ones to do that? This could be called distance threshold. Okay, yeah, got distracted. So that could be our distance threshold. Now this can be hidden. Okay, that gets scaled. And soon I'm gonna switch the mesh to actually, see it in progress. So this one's our hair, which we set the position of. Okay. Then we fillet, which is almost like very important in terms of resolution, actually. So this can be our fillet iterations. And that should be that. That's quite legible, I think. Consolidation complete. Okay, so this is our hair clumping. And then up next is another bake. And then we turn it into a mesh. Okay. I feel like the bake should probably be at the end. Like, we need a bake, but not like every single step. And this takes long, but not that long considering the level of quality. Okay, let's discuss what we did. We started with a surface. We spawned these clusters that are, okay, wait, here's the baked version. We spawned these clusters that are different per iteration. We then clumped and scaled them. And then at the very end, we're going to join our surface. And we haven't even done materials yet, which can make it look way softer. Yeah, that's soft. Okay, so let's try a different mesh and see what that looks like. So what about a cube that, just because of the normals, I'm going to help it out and round it just a little. What does that look like? So we distribute clusters on the cube. It's going to take a sec. We got to be careful with the size of it, because the bigger it is, the more there is to compute because of the number of points. So I'm actually going to make it a little smaller. That's actually going to give us quite a few savings. So instead of viewing it, let's just bake each step. So I'm going to bake that. Once that is baked, I can bake this. Okay, so we have our cube. Why did I click that? We have our cube. We spawned this hair. We run the clumping and the meshing. We join it with the original surface underneath. We view it. And now it's a soft, furry cube. Great. Let's try one more. And so have an hour and some. Pretty good. Let's try, of course, a Suzanne. And I'm going to be very careful with them. Well, no, we can just run it like this. I was going to smooth it, subsurf. I was going to be very careful because you want to subsurf first and then do it. You don't want to subsurf the hair. That would just destroy your computer. So I'm going to bake here. I'm going to bake here. So here's our surface. Here's our hair. Here is our wool version. And here's that with the mesh underneath. And that just doesn't let light through. That's a soft boy. I mean, the prompt today was soft. It's soft. Okay. Okay. So now I believe we can start working on the material. And to do that, just going to sever this connection over here. To do that, I'm going to start with our sphere because it's just a good thing for viewing. So let's go 160 by 80, so it's nice and smooth. I'm going to bake step 1, which I want to make sure is on disk because I might have not done that. Yeah. On disk. On God. And then this one should be on disk. Bake. Okay, so now we should have our nice hair. There we go. And I want to play with the material for that. So all I need to do is I need to throw in a set material node. That material can be material 1, which we can call hair. Okay. And now let's make sure that it is working. So I modify this. Great. Great. Okay. So sheep. Sheep, sheep, sheep. It's kind of yellow. That's kind of the key insight, it seems. So it's kind of yellow. Kind of orange. So just like that. I think that was actually already the correct color. So it's that. It is... Maybe I should make it even thinner. The thing is, once you get close, you can see the spaghetti. But when you go far away, you can't. That just involves adding more hairs per spiral. Is hair shiny? Or actually, what am I doing? Principled hair BSDF. Okay, so we have that. Let's do melanin. What melanin does is it, the color is chosen by the slider. So here's white hair, here's black hair, and we choose something in between without much redness. And what's the difference here? Ah, that's why it was looking so solid. So that already helps. And then we want, do I want it rough? I don't know much about the hair BSDF. Okay. The coat. Don't know what that is. The IOR. Okay, I think it was fine where it was. The offset. The random color. What's that do? I assume it basically makes each hair slightly darker or brighter. Random roughness. Ooh, that might be good. Okay, so there is our hair. Let's try, before we commit, I know translucent can always help with things like this. Let's see what it does. So there's our translucent. Let's make it brighter and vaguely yellow. Okay. Competition. Translucent. So please cast your vote. Can I even make a poll? Oh, I can make a poll. I didn't know. So I'm going to make a translucent versus principled hair called which? Okay, I didn't know that was the case. So cast in your vote. So for reference, translucent Principled hair. Translucent. Principled hair. The votes are coming in. 67 principled hair. 70% principled hair. Yeah, I think that's the consensus. The only thing that I'm interested in is what does the sheen look like? Because I know sheen is for, like, hair. I also know it's very slow. Like, I think what some people do is they add sheen, something like that. Ugh. Okay, the only thing that this tells me is that our hair needs to be a little less white. Maybe just a tiny bit red. Okay. And remember, so much of this depends on our lighting. I wonder what would it look like if I lighted it myself. So I'm going to get rid of the background. You know the drill by now. So let's actually set up a camera here. Okay. So there is our camera, and we can light it, right? So I'm going to add a backlight. That should really catch some of the hair. Why is it going through it? Do we need like two materials? Like one for the object itself? Let's try. So I'm going to add a second material. I'm going to call this material object. And this one should just get the principled BSDF. So now light shouldn't be able to leak through it. But just in case, the surface gets the object material. Okay, good. No light leak. So, is this casting any light? It is, but not enough. Slightly bigger, much stronger. Ooh. Ooh. That's soft. That is soft as fuck. Should soft things get soft lighting? Maybe. Because normally you see sheep in like overcast scenarios. So let's do this. I'm going to make a copy that's kind of like our side light. I know there's a technical name, like fill light or something. And then let's make one more copy that's going to be right in front of the camera. 3-point lighting or something. Okay, so this light should be weaker so that we still get some of that contrast. This light, what if I get rid of it? It needs to maintain some of its dimension. And by the way, I should mention, now that we're kind of like in the final stretch, all those custom nodes, cgmatter.com, go to free nodes, and for the project file that we're almost done making, go here. Very excited to populate this one. Give me 1 second before we wrap up here. Oh, we have new members. If you're in this live stream and your name is Kyle or Johnny, then thank you. I assume you are watching, or it's a coincidence. Okay. What are we doing? I wanted to compare this. What happens if I do a sky texture and then turn off these lights? I think our lighting actually competes a little. That's not bad. So I'm going to turn on all my lights and then just put in a bit of ambient. Just a little. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, I want to get more of that warmth. But not that much of the warmth. Okay. By the way, I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to the thing, just so you know. Let's say we're 500 meters above ground. Ooh. This also makes me think, what if we play with the light temperatures? So that way they're like black body numbers or whatever. I think it should probably be backlit by a warm one. Cold one. Warm one. Wider. No. No, that is incorrect. That is nice though. And we haven't even done any of our compositing yet. So let me, what do we want? I'm add position, I don't need normal. I'm going to add ambient occlusion. Oh, and it might be important, I'm not sure, but our object underneath does kind of poke through, which tells me it kind of matters. So I want to make sure it's not brighter than everything else. What if I make it black? No. Like that, and like very rough. Any opinions? The hair's a little too white. I'll consider that. Let's see. I'm going to go to my hair. Melanin redness. Just melanin. I could see that. But now the world's a little too, the red is nice, but it's a little too intense. So I'm actually going to saturate it, desaturate it. So this is 0, this is 1, and this is 0.5. Subtle. Subtle, but nice. Okay, let's do a render and see what we can do with this. So 100 samples, denoise to frick. Does it go through? Honestly, it shouldn't be crazy. It's just one big geometry mess. But it does look soft, and that was the challenge. That's resolving. Okay, let's do a version with more samples. It might be worth it just for the grade. Because I think the ambient occlusion, which you might know I'm a big fan of, is where we push it. And by the way, thank you everybody for watching. I could totally like be recording this and just upload it later, but I don't think that makes for great videos and it makes for better live streaming. And by the way, expect my camera to freeze while I render. That is to be expected. Yeah, there's some missing hair, which I could always get more of later. This kind of reminds my friend in high school had a dog, golden retriever, so the hair was more, golden orangish yellow. But the quality of it looked exactly like this. Okay, so let's see. Before, after. Definitely a big change. Okay. So I'm going to make a new node group, and let's see what magic we can do. I'm going to start by mixing this with an ambient occlusion. Okay, so ambient occlusion gives us all this detail, right? So we multiply this, and now we have before and after. Just gives it some dimension. I can also make this higher contrast, just using a power function. So this is what we have before. This is a higher contrast version, up to you. But this definitely bumps up the realism in my eyes quite a bit. Before, after. Too much. Before, after. Great. Next up, let's see if we can do an alpha over for the background. I'm not sure what color yet. Maybe something like that. I am interested to see, before I commit, what does this look like if I... that ain't it. Okay, back to compositing. So we got that. Like, I definitely want this to be the whitest thing in the image. So the reason I'm kind of going for this green, like, earthy thing is, like, where do you find sheep? You know? Like, it's like an Ireland thing. Okay. What else do we got? I got my position pass. Position pass is great. I talked about this last tutorial briefly. I don't think I ended up using it, but it's great for just like getting detail and noise that maps onto the surface well. So I'm going to bump up the detail, the roughness, just all the way, really. And then I go from 0.4 to 0.6. Okay, so you can make something like this. And then the idea is maybe you multiply by this. So let's see. This. Okay, does it add detail? Before, after. Yeah, just add some like breakup. So the question is how much? Because it's compositing, I feel fine bringing up all the detail. Okay, it's a little much, but I do like it. Then we run the alpha over. Great. Then let's go for the tried and true glare. Set to bloom. Oh, by the way, we could have been using GPU this whole time. Okay, so the highlights, we need to bring down the threshold. There we go. Before, after, nice and subtle. Vignette. It's almost like the same recipe over and over, honestly. Okay, before and after. And now the real deal. So by the way, initial render, composite. And now is where we go bonkers with the colors. So, first of all, what view transform? Chronos? Chronos can look quite real. It can look quite real. But then you got to really tone down the saturation because it goes hard. But now it looks very real, but does it look soft? That's the question. I don't know if it does. What about the contrast? Low contrast? Low contrast might actually be softer than high contrast. I know normally you want that like crispy image, but let's see. Like it should look soft and inviting. Okay. And then I think another thing is the white balance. Like how warm is it? Very warm. Yikes, wrong way. Very warm. Yeah. Before, after. Let's make it more intense so it can be seen. Before, after. Yeah, that's definitely softer. So 8,000. Now the color isn't great. And then the glare is way too much. Okay. Like it needs to look inviting. Oh wait, a second ago I had something I liked. Like that. Okay. Let's play with the saturation of the thing itself. High saturation? I mean, obviously that's too much, but 20%? I like that. Hue? Nope. 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 Okay. Now what is making it look so crisp? I don't know. But there's nothing stopping us. And like normally you want as much detail in your render as possible, and that's true. But like a filter soften for the soft. Okay? Before, after. Might be an actual excuse to do that. By 65%. Yeah, it might just need more geo and stray fluffy hairs like you said. But assuming that the mesh is fixed, like I'll do it later for the actual render. But somebody reminded me, depth of field, which will definitely help it look soft. So let's see. I like to start really low and then work my way back up. Okay, so that's obviously too much. 0.4. Just some 0.6. Before, before, after, before, after. Just a little less. Before, after. Yeah, I think as I bring up the density of this hair, it's going to be much better. Okay. I think I'm pretty happy with this. And let's not forget, I can push it later. I'm going to call this By the way, what does it look like if it sits on something? Last time we found that it mattered quite a bit. I don't know if it really contributes to the softness, and it's not in the spirit of Nodevember. So all of these can be our scene. Our cube, if you remember, we just started with a modest cube, is our Nodevember Day 9 soft, which should also be the name of this node group and everything. Yeah. Let's just try cranking it one time, just to see. So let's make sure my viewport is fast. Not doing anything it doesn't need to do. Okay. So how am I going to make this fast? I'm going to take our density, crank it. Oh, I shouldn't have done that while it's connected. Okay, so I'm going to take our density. I'm going to crank that. Bake. So double the density. Double trouble. I'm going to take the hair clumping, bring up the fillet to 3, and because there's more, I think I can get away with making it thinner. Bake. Okay. And now, should I view it? Let's see. Hopefully it gets rid of some of those bald spots. Sheesh, this is slow. But I could see it being softer. Okay. So I'm going to hide this in the viewport. And then let's compare it. So this is our, how do I get this? Composited? I want to see our composited. So F11, render result, viewer node. Okay. Okay. This is what we had before. And now let's render over this to see what we have after and if it indeed looks softer. If it doesn't look softer, it's not correct. But is it softer? Okay, while this loads, it's going to take a moment to do that, by the way. Oh yeah, it's chugging. This might be a case where I actually want to use tiling. I think actually maybe the one with less will end up looking better. Even though it's less realistic in a way. We'll see. This has not had time to resolve yet. Let's give it 100 samples instead. Like this is chugging. So let's do 128 samples. I'm gonna let it do its tiling, which is somewhere. Performance, tile size. Let's bring that down so I can break up the image into sections. Which I found that for the ice, there was some render where it actually helped a lot. But let's see. Okay, that's blasting. How are we doing on stats? Okay, GPU is being used. Great. Yeah, this was the way to go. Okay. Before, after. Note that this will be mushier as well because the thing wasn't many samples. It's almost like it's worse. It's almost like it's too much. Okay, so let's go back one more time. And instead of 500 or 1,000, let's go up to 650. Bake that. Oh, this needs to be visible. Bake. Take the thing which was at 1. It can still be lower, but not by as much. Bake that. And now that I know about tiling, I think we can crank up the samples. Okay, so we have the, let's see after. And by the way, in the before, did we use depth of field? Not yet. So let's keep that in mind. I think, like, in my opinion, the thing we did where we made the spiral, like, whether it's accurate or not, it shines when you can actually see the spirals. Okay, so this one is definitely in the running. Before, after. Now, what this might be telling me, actually, is that it might be our compositing, even. Because that's looking softer just in the sense that it's brighter. So what's ruining that? That's fine. That might be the offender. Okay, let's see. What happens if I set this back to 1 and bring it down? It's interesting that just the colors can be the difference between soft and rough. Like, that's now spiky all of a sudden. And that's soft. Okay, I think we've recovered the softness. And I don't like the color of the background. It's somehow ruining it. I don't know why. I'll know it when I see it. What is the one that makes it look right? Nope. That's kind of nice. I'll remember this purplish. Okay, let's go back to the purplish. Okay, that's sort of nice. Yeah, there's something wrong. I take back that saturation. Why is it not soft? Yeah, again, it might just be too much. Okay, let's do one final one, and then I will be happy with whatever. We'll go down to 600. Bake. We are going to bring this up. There was just something correct about that one. Like, it could have been the seed, it could have been anything. Okay. Ooh, I think this is starting to look right. And I will fix this white underneath and make it more like yellowish. Okay. Okay, don't ruin it, compositing. Okay. Well, now that I'm getting that phone call, I think this is actually a good place to end it. Okay, so I'm going to play with it later, but great progress for 2 hours. Okay, I just want to remind everybody, cgmatter.com, that's the thing I'm promoting right now. Get your free nodes for real. You don't need to be a member. But on top of that, if you want to, one, support what I do, but this isn't me doing something, this isn't you doing something for me. I don't like it when people are like, join my Patreon, do my, like, why? Why? I want to give you something of value. If you think of it's a value, join my website. We have 5 years of project file. Imagine 400, even more. I don't even know. Blend files. Some of them alone are worth like $5 to $20, and there's 400 of them. I'm gonna upload Nodevember once I finish day 9, which will be probably later today or tomorrow. And yeah, that's the last thing I want to promote. And also, what is our thing for tomorrow? So we did soft, zip. I might avoid a zipper. It's too obvious. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And for those who know, I always, 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 always finish the live stream with a question. Only one. There will never be two. So if you have a question, ask it right now. If you feel like it's a boring question, it might be, but you know, I'm always interested to see what people have to think, and more so, it just feel. By the way, I was gonna do zip file. Don't steal that idea from me. It's mine. Ask your question. It's just a nice way to end things, I think. Who has? Okay. Okay, we have one question. I'll wait till there's like at least 3 options. Let me see what that call was about. Zip line. Okay. 20 more seconds and then I'm choosing. I think there's only one question. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. The question is, mainly it's because it's like one of only 2, is where do you see yourself in the next 1, 2, 5/10 years? Where do you see yourself? I think in 1 year, I expect to have a kid. In 2 years, I expect to have a kid who's 1 years old. In 5 years, I expect to probably be running kind of like a different kind of business. Maybe, I mean, Wonder is going to be around, so I imagine it might still have something to do with that. But if I look at what I've done over the last few years, it's changed a lot. So I'm going to pick the work one for that. And then in 10 years, I'm going to be full dad mode. Unrecognizable, bald, nothing left. So thank you everybody for watching. Again, the only thing I have to promote that I think is worth the while is cgmatter.com. Thank you everybody for tuning into the live stream. And I will see you tomorrow if I decide to stream. And I probably should, otherwise I will fall